Hi, this is Taylor Teeley presenting on my implementation project for EDUC 522. I decided that I would spend my time looking at how we can create authentic creative learning experiences for our students, specifically by utilizing the tools and resources found in my school's makerspace. I chose to look at how STEM materials and self-guided learning can enhance these authentic learning experiences for my students. Research shows that creating creative thinking and problem-solving students is only done by creating these authentic experiences and allowing for their creations and creative thinking abilities to come out while they're working and solving problems. For this project, I had 3 goals. The first being that I wanted my students to develop an interest in STEM-based learning activities. It's not always something that students have access to or understand, so I felt that the interest level would really grow during this project. Second, I wanted my students to be able to solve problems by exploring STEM materials in a makerspace, because research shows that allowing students to use STEM materials really truly does enhance their ability to solve problems. And lastly, I wanted students to be able to develop collaborative problem-solving skills by working in a makerspace. Not only should they be able to solve problems on their own, they should be able to do it with their peers without much direction. During week 1, my students had free exploration of makerspace materials. In this time, students chose a STEM tool that they found to be most interesting and one that they thought they would enjoy exploring at a later time. Along the side here, you can see I've listed 9 of the materials that my students chose to explore, and this is just a small snapshot. They looked at things like Spheros, 3D pens, Osmos with the iPads, Kinects, Strawbees, Code and Go mice, which you can see in the video. Several of my students working on coding with those mice. We had felting pens where they could create different objects. Of course, we had iPads with things like video game creating tools. And then we also had a green screen, which they could explore and record videos with certain backgrounds. This video shows, again, the Code and Go mice, but it also shows the collaboration happening, which was one of my project goals. I wanted students to be able to figure out how these tools worked without my guidance, but with guidance from their peers and using those ideas to accomplish a goal. During week 1, I really wanted it to be open-ended. I didn't want there to be any guidance whatsoever, and I wanted them to just become comfortable with the materials that they had access to and see what it is they could actually accomplish with the tools as well. If we move into week 2, I really wanted to narrow down the tools that the students plan to use for the remainder of the project. I did this because as I reflected on week 1, it seemed that the amount of tools that the makerspace had to offer was almost overwhelming for this age group, and I felt that just with a little bit of paring down, their time could be used more wisely, and I thought that their problem solving, they could spend more time problem solving because they didn't have to worry about which tool would be best. There would just be a smaller pool to choose from. Also during week 2, I had students write the response to some of these questions that you see here. Specifically, what made you choose this tool as your focus? Were there challenges that you faced during the initial exploration with this tool? And then how did you problem solve to figure out how this tool would help you during the remainder of this project? And again, students explored several tools as a whole class to help them with their decisions. So not only did I get their initial feedback, but I also allowed them to continue their exploration, getting more comfortable with the tools and what they had to offer, and helping guide them towards what problem they wanted to solve and how these tools were going to help. Along the side here, you can see several of my students exploring with a tool called Cubelets. Again, similar to the Code and Go mice that you saw during week's 1 slide, these are a coding tool, so very popular among this project, or within this project, I should say. As we moved into week 3, week 3's focus was truly solving their problem. So during week 1 and week 2, it was just the initial explorations and getting comfortable. And now in week 3, I allowed them to narrow in their focus to just one tool and one problem that they wanted to solve with either a partner or with a small group of people. While they solved these problems, I encouraged them to keep trying, to keep problem solving even when things came up or problems came up, because I was part of the project. And we spent a lot of time as a class talking about how when we go into a makerspace and when we use STEM materials, it's truly about trial and error. You have to try things and see if they work, and if they don't, you make adjustments accordingly. And I think this was something unique that my students hadn't had experience with, and ended up being a really good way for them to grow and to collaborate, like with their partner or their small group. Once they chose their problem and created their solution, they had to plan for how they were going to present this information to their class, because not only were they solving problems, I wanted them to be able to tell us how, or maybe why they solved that problem. And as we go into week 4 was just about presentation and reflection. We spent the first 3 weeks really digging through materials and solving those problems. But week 4, I wanted the students to be able to look back on what they did and truly reflect on the growth that they saw in each other, maybe the growth that they saw in their peers. And I also wanted to get their interest level now that the project or the implementation plan was over. So I did give them a Google Forms survey, asking them just simple questions similar to what I did in week 1 about their interest level. Did they enjoy the STEM materials, or did they not? Did they feel comfortable in the makerspace, or did they not? Did they enjoy working with their peers, or did they not? These simple questions gave me some data that helped with my project goals that I talked about a little bit earlier, because I wanted to get their perspective. It's different when the teacher observes and pulls information that they think they saw or they think students were demonstrating, but getting the students' responses is more important to me for this project, because they're the ones that were doing it, and they were the ones that were problem solving and exploring these materials for the first time. During week 4, I allowed time for a few student presentations, and on the next slide I'll share a couple of examples of what my students ended up with at the end of this. And we also had whole class discussions and reflection time. And that was just an open-ended conversation for students to share out things that they maybe would have done differently, things that they would change if they could do it again, things that they wish were different as far as what was in the makerspace or what wasn't, and then plans for what they would do next time. So if they got another opportunity to solve another problem, how could they use the tools that they explored combined with other tools? How could they come up with a second solution using the tools that they already chose? And it was really eye-opening to hear that students really did enjoy what they did. Students felt those creative thinking skills coming into play. They felt that collaborating with peers was, again, another unique experience that unfortunately students don't have a lot of opportunity to have. My project findings were that, like I said before, students enjoyed this implementation plan. They enjoyed being able to demonstrate their abilities to problem solve and their abilities to create things without instruction from the teacher. They enjoyed being able to self-direct their learning and create these experiences on their own. In this picture here, you'll see just one example of a student and what he chose to do as a result of this project. During the initial stages of this project, when asked what he wanted to change, the student responded by saying he had nothing to carry his artwork in. As a result, he used the felting needle and the felt to create a basket to carry his work in. This was completely independent. From the planning of his creation to the actual product itself, the student demonstrated exactly what a makerspace is there to do. It's there to provide the tools and the creative, unique, authentic, and collaborative workspace to allow projects like his art basket to happen. While this is just a simple example of an outcome from my project, I think it really encompasses what I was hoping to do and what really research shows that makerspaces are there to do as well. And lastly, a few other examples of my project findings that students did. A few students said that there weren't enough dog toys at shelters, so they wanted to create dog toys for the pets at places like the Animal Rescue League or the Humane Society. So they used various crafting materials to create them. Some used sewing machines, some used the felting needles like you saw in the previous post. I had one student who needed to power something. He didn't have a specific item, but he knew that he wanted to create power. So he connected and ran a circuit to make a motor run. And he did this without task cards, without instruction from me. He simply had the tools in front of him and kept trying, again, that trial and error process until he was able to be successful. Some students needed toys for recess. They didn't feel we had enough toys to play with at recess, so they created dolls out of crafting materials. One student wanted a purse, so she sewed a purse with fabric and a sewing machine. Along the same lines, another student wanted another bag or object holder, and we had a tool where you fused plastic together to create different objects. So the student chose to make a bag of sorts by fusing different plastics together with a hot iron. And the last thing that you'll see over to the right here is that two of my boys wanted a new video game. So they coded a video game with a program called Scratch within the makerspace, and you can see them collaborating here doing that. Overall, I found this project to be very successful. I feel that myself as an educator learned a lot. I feel that my students learned a lot, and I definitely think that this is something that I would do any opportunity that I get. And my future plans are to find ways that I can weave my content that I'm already teaching in my classroom into things that we can do in the makerspace, because I saw engagement, I saw collaboration, and those are things that I want to continue to instill in my students and help them grow any chance that I get.